Has it ever happened to you? That strange feeling that the moment already happened, you call it déjà vu. But what if it's not just a glitch in your mind? What if it's an echo of something you've already lived, or something that's still coming? Tonight, 3 stories will prove that sometimes remembering is just the beginning of the end. My name is Michael Reyes. I'm 29 years old and I live alone in a 3-story old building in downtown New Haven, Connecticut. I work remotely as a data analyst for a company that expects me to be available 24/7. That means I spend most of my nights wide awake, drowning in spreadsheets while the rest of the world sleeps, or at least it should be sleeping. The first time something strange happened was on a cold Wednesday in March. The whole city felt smothered by a heavy silence, broken only by a faint whistle of the wind against the windows. I was on the living room couch, struggling to keep my eyes open while reviewing a report that needed to be submitted in the morning. That's when I heard it. A sharp, dry ping from my laptop in the bedroom. Odd. It was late, 3:12 a.m. to be exact. I glanced at the digital clock on the shelf. 3:12. That number burned into my memory like a scar. I got up and walked to the laptop. The still-lit screen showed a new email in my inbox. The sender, my own email address. I thought it might be some automatic test, maybe something from IT, but the subject line, that stopped me cold. Report for tomorrow, 3:12 a.m. I opened the email. The body was empty, but there was an attachment, an Excel file with the exact name of the weekly reports I usually prepared. When I clicked on it, my stomach turned. The file was complete, with sales data, calculations I hadn't even made yet, and even a mistake I usually made when I was too tired, the kind of error no system could predict. The report was ready before I had even created it. Back in the email body, a phrase appeared, as if it had just been typed. That doesn't happen. It's not supposed to happen. But there it was, blinking in black font on a white background. It's beginning. Watch the clock. My first instinct was to laugh. I blamed it on a system glitch or some weird time-based bug. Maybe an IT prank. Maybe a virus messing with my head. But the feeling, that crushing sense that I had lived this exact moment before, was overwhelming. The air grew heavier. The clock stayed fixed at 3:12, as if time had frozen. I shut the laptop, went to the window, looked outside. The street was empty, like always. But right then, I swear I felt that something was watching me from inside the apartment. I went back to my room, laid down, tried to sleep. I couldn't sleep, because in the dark, even with my eyes closed, all I could see was that phrase floating in my mind like a curse. It's beginning, and what came next was only the beginning. The next night, sleep didn't even try to find me. With every passing minute, my body became more aware of the silence, the kind of silence that pulses inside your skull. I looked at the clock, 3:08. 4 minutes to go. My heart was already pounding like it was trying to warn me about something I couldn't understand. I kept watching the laptop screen, even though it was closed, just waiting. And then, as if some invisible command had responded to my anxiety, it came alive on its own. The screen lit up, slicing through the darkness of the room with its pale glow. 3:12. New email. Subject: do not enter the elevator at 10 p.m. Body of the message: you haven't died yet. That sentence, it didn't feel like a metaphor. It felt like a warning, a countdown. I left the laptop open and walked to the kitchen, hands trembling. I leaned over the sink, trying to make sense of what kind of game this was. Hackers, some kind of prank. But how did they know about the report? How could they predict the mistake? Then I heard the elevator, that metallic groan of gears, the dragging of the chain, the familiar ding of arrival on the 3rd floor. But it was 3:14 a.m. It never ran at that hour. The building was nearly empty. I knew my neighbors' routines. No one used the elevator in the middle of the night. I stepped to the door, peered through the peephole, and my heart simply stopped. There he was, walking out of the elevator. A man with my face, identical. Same beard, same black jacket, same jeans I had worn the day before. He didn't look at me. He just stepped out calmly, turned right down the hallway and vanished. I stood there, frozen, for I don't know how long. The next morning, I went to the building manager and asked to see the hallway security footage. He told me the system crashed during the night. The hard drive had frozen. Exactly at 3:12 a.m., it was like everything was being carefully erased behind me. And right there, standing in that empty corridor, with the echo of the elevator still ringing in my memory, I understood this wasn't just about me. It wasn't a coincidence. It felt like someone or something was pushing me down a path I had already walked, maybe more than once. After that night, I started losing control of my routine. I barely slept, ate even less. Every notification on my computer gave me chills. I began to avoid email, as if it were a living entity. But every time I tried to distance myself, something pulled me back. On Friday, exactly at 3:12 a.m., another message arrived. Subject: today you will cut yourself while doing the dishes. I didn't have the courage to open the message body. I slammed the laptop shut in frustration. Ignored it. Went to the kitchen determined to act normal. I washed a bowl, then a mug. When I picked up the dirty knife, it slipped. It happened fast, almost mechanically. The blade sliced my finger with surgical precision. The blood flowed, hot and thick like it had been waiting. The cut matched the premonition perfectly. I returned to the bedroom, breathless. Opened the laptop again. The message was still there, and now the body appeared clearly. Resistance is useless. You are inside. That's when I began to write everything down. In a physical notebook, away from the computer. Emails, timestamps, events. I needed to understand, to find a loophole, a way out. The following week, I told Amanda, a co-worker from my company who I still kept in touch with. I expected her to laugh, but she stayed silent, said I needed to rest, that it was just stress. 2 days later, she called me. Her voice was trembling, like she was holding back tears. She had received an email and from my address. Michael is no longer the only one. The next morning, Amanda invited me for coffee near the Yale campus. She looked different, paler, eyes darting everywhere. I saw it, she whispered. I saw myself crossing the street. On the other side, same clothes, same purse, same scar on my arm. We sat in silence, just listening to cups clinking on nearby tables. She showed me the email. The header said it came from my IP, but I hadn't sent anything. It was like something or someone was using our own voices to warn us. That night, as I reviewed my notebook, I noticed a pattern. Every message arrived exactly at 3:12 a.m., always a warning, always followed by a real consequence. These weren't dreams, not hallucinations. It felt like we were trapped in a loop of events we had already lived and forgotten. But by who? By us? Or by the versions of us still out there, living the repetitions we couldn't escape? The weeks that followed were a blur. Time no longer seemed to follow normal rules. Days and nights melted into each other. Sometimes I was sure I was reliving moments. Small gestures, words, even my own expressions in the mirror. It all felt like a constant déjà vu. Amanda stopped responding. I tried calling, texting, nothing. Then, one night, precisely at 3:12 a.m., the final email arrived. No subject, no sender, just a single line in the message body. Tonight, you must not open the door. Minutes later, 3 knocks. Sharp, precise. 3. My spine turned to ice. I dragged myself toward the door but couldn't bring myself to look through the peephole. I backed away, retreating into the darkness of the living room, straining to hear anything. Nothing, just my own panicked heartbeat. I returned to the laptop. The screen was black, then it lit up again. The same email had been resent, same message, but this time there was an attachment, a video. Hands trembling, I opened the file. It was night vision footage of me, lying in bed, asleep, or at least it seemed like it. The camera filmed from above, as if mounted on the ceiling. In the corner of the frame, the digital clock showed 3:11, then 3:12, and then my body moved. Slowly, my head turned straight toward the camera. My eyes were open, completely black, expressionless. But the worst part was that I was smiling, a calm, knowing smile, like I was aware I was being watched. I paused the video. The sound of the wind outside stopped abruptly. The lights in my apartment flickered twice, then stabilized and dimmer than before. I returned to the video, tried to fast forward, but the player froze. The image remained fixed on that eerie version of me, staring directly at the viewer. Then I heard it, from the bedroom, footsteps, slow, dragging, one after the other on the wooden floor, and with each step, my computer screen flickered, as if syncing with whatever was approaching. The screen went black, and the clock in the lower corner froze. 3:12. That night was the last time I tried to resist. I didn't sleep, didn't eat. I sat on the living room floor, back against the wall, staring at the blinking digits of the digital clock, frozen. 3:12. The night felt endless, as if time itself had paused, waiting for me to make a choice. I stood up slowly, walked to the balcony. Outside, the street was empty. The street lamps flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Rain had started to fall, slow, spaced droplets. The air was thick, like every breath carried weight. And then I saw him, standing across the street, perfectly still. Me, but different, older, his face pale, eyes far too dark, like pits of absence. He was wearing the same clothes I had thrown out months ago. A stained grey shirt, torn jeans, worn sneakers, and he was staring at me, not blinking, not moving, just waiting. I stepped back inside, locking the balcony door with shaking hands, went to the computer, turned it on again. Nothing. Black screen, the sound of the fans louder than usual. Then, a window opened by itself. Oh, system alert. Backup synchronization started. In the corner of the screen, for a brief second, an image appeared, a distorted reflection of him, of me. Inside the apartment, standing behind me, I spun around. Nothing. The apartment was empty, but the air smelled wrong. The same smell I remembered from the very first email, burnt rubber mixed with citrus cleaner. Strong, inescapable. The wall clock fell off by itself. Behind it, taped to the wall, was an envelope. Inside, a single yellowed sheet of paper, typewritten, "You've made this choice before, now make it again." The sound of footsteps returned, inside the apartment, but not from the floor, from the walls, the ceiling, from places no one should be walking. The doorknob began to turn. On its own, slowly. I didn't run, didn't scream, I just stood up and walked to the door. I opened it. On the other side was me, but not like before. This time, he smiled and spoke in my own voice, only rougher, more worn. "You finally remembered." Everything turned white, like someone had erased the world with a single click. And just before the sound disappeared completely, I heard one last notification echo in the darkness. Backup complete, 3:12 a.m. My name is Ethan Morrow. I'm 33 years old and live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I work as a graphic designer and, whenever possible, I spend my weekends visiting my parents in the countryside, in a mountainous region called Hickory, where I grew up. This story began on a Friday night, when I decided to drive there alone. I got in my car and headed down US 321, a road I know well, long, quiet, surrounded by pine trees, with curves that always seem tighter than the last. I've driven that way hundreds of times. But that night, something was wrong. First, the smell. It came out of nowhere. A strong odor of gasoline mixed with smoke and blood. Even with the windows closed, it poured into the car as if injected through the vents. I felt sick. My body froze. I pulled over to the shoulder. There was nothing around. No dead animal, no accident. But something deep inside me whispered, something awful happened here. And then the memories came. But they weren't normal memories. They were scenes, flash images, a gas pump, a gunshot, muffled screams, a body hitting the concrete, and the strangest part, I wasn't watching as a witness. I was the victim. I could feel the impact, smell the blood, feel the cold ground. I even remembered the gas station attendant's face, a tall black man with a thick beard and terrified eyes. But I had never seen him in real life. My first reaction was to laugh, to convince myself it was all in my head. But the weight in my chest didn't go away. Something was very wrong. I kept driving. Just a few more minutes and I'd be home. Just a few more. And then I saw the station, isolated, old, with a rusted sign and a single flickering light above the pump. It was the exact place from my memories. Same booth, same dirt entrance. I stopped, not out of need, but instinct. Something told me to watch. And then I saw her. A white SUV pulled in from the other side. A woman stepped out, alone, brown hair tied back, same type of car, same age. It was like looking into a mirror, a reversed version of myself. The rest happened in seconds. A man came out of the woods, armed. She screamed. He fired. She collapsed. The scene I had remembered played out exactly as in the flashes, except it wasn't me. I had just witnessed my own death, only in another version of reality. The next morning, I saw the headline on my phone. Tourist killed in gas station robbery on US 321 around 10:17 p.m. It was the exact time I passed by. Since that night, I've started to remember other deaths. And every single one of them, Faz, was mine. After that night, everything changed. Coming home didn't bring peace. Every corner felt off, like it had been slightly rearranged by hands that weren't mine. A crooked picture frame, an object out of place, and that nagging feeling that someone or something had been there while I was driving back. Over the next few days, the flashes became more frequent, but now they weren't just about the gas station. They were completely different scenes. Fast, suffocating, me drowning in a murky lake under a burning orange sky, me falling off a cliff, the rocks rushing up in total silence, me trapped in a burning car, slamming my hands against the window. Each scene was far too vivid to be a dream. Every detail felt real. The fabric of the car seat, the stench of gasoline, the dirty water forcing its way into my lungs, and in all of them, I felt the same end. I died, but I always woke up in my own bed, alive, like I was jumping from one version of reality to another, always narrowly escaping. I considered seeing a doctor, maybe a psychiatrist. I tried telling a friend that without getting too deep into the horror, but he just laughed and told me to stay off the internet for a while. But I knew, deep down, I knew. This wasn't psychological. It felt like something was leaking. A fracture, maybe. As if the lines between all the lives I've lived had torn open, and now memories from alternate versions of myself were bleeding into me. I started avoiding unfamiliar places. More than that, I avoided mirrors, because one night, while brushing my teeth, I saw my reflection blink, but I hadn't blinked, and in that split second, he looked at me with something I didn't recognize. Pity, as if he knew something I was about to discover. I started marking a map. Every time a new flash came, I wrote down where it happened. I used different colored pens, red for accidents, blue for drownings, black for deaths I couldn't identify. Soon, my bedroom wall turned into a mosaic of roots and endings, and they all had one thing in common: me. No matter the setting, an old bridge in Asheville, an abandoned trail in Boone, a dim intersection in Statesville, in every one of those memories, I saw my own body, sometimes just before the end, sometimes after. And the worst part, some of those places I'd never been, at least not that I remembered. I decided to test it. I drove to one of those locations, an isolated field north of Lenoir. I had never even heard of the place, but in the flash, I remembered the wooden fence and the sound of metal wind chimes. When I got there, it was exactly the same broken gate, same metallic creak, and the chimes, just like in the memory, hanging from the porch of an abandoned house I'd never seen but somehow already knew. I drove back in silence. The radio had no signal. The GPS froze. That night, I had the worst dream of them all. I was running through a pitch-black forest, barefoot. My feet were bleeding. Someone or something was chasing me. And when I finally collapsed, I saw my own body on the ground wilder, but I was still running, as if I had already died there once, and whatever was left of me was trying to stop it from happening again. I woke up screaming. In the bathroom mirror, I noticed a mark on the back of my neck I'd never had before, like a scar, from something I wasn't supposed to remember. But what really broke me was the email. Yes, another email, no sender, no subject, just a single line. Next destination, exit 27 northbound. I looked at the map, exit 27 on US 321, a place where, in every version, I never made it out alive. It took me 3 days to decide. During that time, I tried to ignore the email. I deleted it, blocked my own address, disconnected from the internet. But every night at 3:12 a.m., my phone would light up by itself, even turned off. No signal, no power, and yet the same notification appeared. Next destination, exit 27, northbound. It felt like the decision wasn't mine, like I had already agreed. On Saturday at 9:47 p.m. I got in the car. The highway was empty. The streetlights stretched behind me like golden tunnels that sealed shut once I passed. I turned on the radio out of habit, just static. GPS, still frozen since the last trip. Gradually, the air changed. It wasn't hot or cold. It was old, like time itself had faded. The inside of the car windows began to fog up, even though no one had breathed. Then I saw the sign, exit 27, 1 mile. A weight pressed on my chest. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. My fingers gripped the wheel like they'd done this before. My back was soaked in sweat. My heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, rehearsed. The turn came. My hand moved on its own. I took the exit. The road darkened. No signs, no fences, no horizon. The only thing visible was the beam of my headlights, and something in the middle of the road. I stopped. The light revealed an object lying on the asphalt. A backpack. My backpack. The one I lost years ago on a trip. Identical, with the same ink stain on the zipper. I stepped out of the car slowly. The air here was thick, like it had weight. It smelled like ozone and scorched iron. I approached the backpack, and as I touched it, I heard it, footsteps coming from behind. Slow, deliberate, not an animal, someone. I turned around, and I saw myself again. But this time, I looked different. Torn clothes, dirty face, hollow eyes, skin that looked ancient, like it had burned and regrown. And he spoke. "This is your last chance to turn back." But I couldn't speak. My throat locked. The version in front of me smiled faintly and slowly walked away, backward, into the forest. When I looked back at the road, the car was gone. The road was now just dirt, and the sky, the stars above seemed repeated, like duplicated patterns in a broken painting. I was trapped, in the version that never made it out. I didn't sleep again that night. Every fiber of my being felt wrong. Reality seemed frayed. Time no longer moved forward. It looped, fragmented, repeating details I both knew and feared. I got out of the car, but instead of returning to the highway, I found myself standing in a field found under the same flickering yellow streetlight I'd seen in many flashes. The air smelled like ozone and burnt ink, the ground cold and damp. Ahead, the forest greeted me. The road behind had vanished. I gathered my courage and walked. Every few steps, another flash. Me drowning in that lake again. Me falling off the cliff again. Me engulfed in flames inside a car. This time I didn't wake up afterward. Then I reached the clearing. There, a circle of misplaced objects from each death. A soaked shoe, a torn shirt, a mangled steering wheel piece, and a photograph of me smiling in daylight, the one I took before leaving Raleigh. Underneath, typed in plain text, "These are all your deaths, all versions, and this one is final." I realized I was standing inside my own timeline's cemetery. From the edge of the woods, another Ethan stepped out. There had to have been hundreds, all versions of me. I recognized their faces in each flash, their eyes shadowed, haunting, resigned. They circled me, slowly, silently. There was no fear in their gaze, only sorrow. When they spoke, their voices echoed in unison. "It's time." The ground under me began to crack, a crack long overdue, just like all the fractures that had been leaking through my reality. And then I fell again. Only this time there was no waking up. I felt cold, stillness, an endless void. Somewhere beyond the breakdown of time, I understood. My choice wasn't to survive, it was to accept. My name is Eric Hargrove. I work in applied neuroscience at a semi-government research center on the outskirts of Seattle, the kind of place that feels more like a military base than an academic institute.
Been here before.
Concrete hallways,
It never ends well.
key-coded doors, no windows, just white lights and the constant hum of the ventilation systems. The sector where I worked was Section B. There were 3 main doors along that hallway. Brahma, the one on the left, led to the neural simulation lab. The one in the middle to the central server, a quantum experimental system. The one on the right, well, the one on the right was just a wall. No handle, no number. Sealed since I first arrived there 7 years ago. But something about it bothered me. It always had. It was as if my eyes instinctively avoided that surface, a space the brain ignored, like an architectural blind spot. Then I started dreaming about it, every night, for weeks. In the dream, I walked down the hallway, like I did every day. But when I reached door 3, it was open, and inside him there was no room, only a dark space with a pulsing sound, like an electronic heartbeat. I stepped in and saw myself sitting in front of a screen. On the screen I was saying, "Now you've been here before, and it never ends well." I would wake up soaked in sweat, and every time I walked past the real hallway, I felt something watching me from that blind wall. I told my lab colleague, Dr. Calhoun. He laughed, said the phantom door was just a technical seal. But that night, I found an old file on the servers. Date, 2011. Subject, B3, do not enter without level 7 authorization. Note, behavioral interference detected. Repetition of patterns before physical contact. Repeated patterns. Before physical contact. What did that even mean? I began reviewing the security logs for that section, and what I found left me frozen. For the past 4 weeks, the hallway camera in Section B had recorded a man walking alone at 3:12 a.m. Same posture, same lab coat, same direction. The face was hard to make out, but in the reflection on the polished floor, it was my face, and I was never there at that time. The next night, I arrived at the lab well before my shift. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to understand. The corridor was empty, as always. At 2:57 a.m., I hid inside the maintenance room with a partial view of the 3rd door. I turned on my recorder. The red light from the security camera blinked slowly, as if it couldn't decide whether to function or not. At exactly 3:12 a.m., he appeared, a man wearing a lab coat identical to mine, walking slowly, without hesitation, like someone who already knew the way. He passed right by me without noticing, but what froze me was this. He cast no shadow, none at all. The corridor lights passed right through him, like a ripple in time. He stopped in front of door 3, stood there for exactly 7 seconds, and then vanished. He didn't walk away. He didn't enter. He just disappeared. I ran to the spot, knocked on the wall. No echo, no seam, no hidden latch, just cold concrete. The next morning, I tried to access the backup footage. but the system had a gap of 12 minutes, as if the time between 3:07 and 3:19 simply didn't exist. I brought the notes home, determined to keep this off the supervisor's radar. Then, it started happening to me. Everything became duplicated. I'd begin typing an email and realize I had already written it. I'd see myself reflected in screens before I even approached them. One day, I took the subway, and when I looked across the station, I saw myself standing on the opposite platform, with no expression at all. He turned his back and boarded the train. I never saw where he went, but that same day, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address, just a typed note inside. Of all the versions of you, only one will make it out. After that night, something inside me shifted. It was no longer just fear. It was the certainty that I was being replicated, repeated, or worse, replaced. I began documenting everything. I recorded the monitor reflections, the duplicated emails, the constant déjà vu. But whenever I tried to show someone, the files vanished, the proof corrupted, as if something or someone was correcting reality from behind the scenes. So I made a decision. I was going to open that damn door. I returned to the lab on a rainy Tuesday night. I brought tools, cameras, and an old analog stethoscope. I wanted to hear if there was any sound coming from the other side. At 2:45 a.m., I stood in front of door 3. The stethoscope pressed against the surface revealed a low, pulsating sound, like a digital heartbeat accelerating. It wasn't plumbing, it wasn't electricity. It was like something alive was in there. At 3:10, the hallway grew cold. The lights flickered. When the clock turned 3:12, I felt it, not heard, felt the doorknob, which didn't exist, formed beneath my hand, as if the metal itself obeyed my decision. I turned it. The door opened inward, and in front of me was the same hallway but reversed. The network cables hung from the ceiling. Door signs were written backward. The security camera pointed at the floor. The hum of the ventilation system played in reverse. I stepped in. Every footstep sounded muffled, as if I were walking through a hastily rendered world. Everything seemed an unfinished replica of reality. At the end of the hallway, a single red light blinked. Beneath it, a chair, and in that chair, me, looking exhausted, sunken eyes, grayish skin. I slowly lifted his head and said in a hoarse, worn-out voice, "This is the part where you realize you were never the original." I stood frozen, staring at myself, or at whatever looked like me. He blinked slowly, as if every movement required effort. His skin was too pale, stretched tight like old parchment. When he stood up, I noticed he limped. "You don't remember, do you?" he said almost sadly. "But we've been here before. You came in, I went out." My heart pounded. I tried to step back, but the door behind me was gone. The hallway I entered from had vanished. There was no way back, only this reversed copy of my world and him, watching me with eyes that knew too much. "There can't be two of us out there at the same time," he continued. "This place balances us, it's a scale." Then I understood. This wasn't a laboratory. It was an exchange chamber, a liminal space between versions, where whoever steps in replaces, and the one replaced stays behind. He handed me a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I opened it. There was a single line and typed in my handwriting. "You thought you were the original, everyone does." Slowly, he began walking away, limping down the inverted corridor. Each of his steps erased the floor behind him, as if, by leaving, he was taking my world with him. I ran after him, shouting, begging, but he never looked back. At the end of the corridor, he slipped through a slit of light and vanished. I stood there, alone, in a hallway that was vanishing inch by inch, with a door that never existed, with me, or rather, with what was left of me. I don't know how long I stood frozen in that dark corridor. Time didn't flow the same there. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours it never ended. When I finally moved, my footsteps made no sound. as if the floor itself was ignoring me. I returned to the room where I had met my double. The chair was still there, the paper too, but now there was a mirror. It hadn't been there before. I would have noticed. I stepped closer, slowly. I looked, and there he was. But it wasn't my reflection waiting for me. It was him, the one who left. He was on the other side now, as if he were the one watching this world and not the other way around. When I touched the mirror, he smiled and made a gesture with his hand, like he was saying, "Now it's your turn to watch." I screamed, pounded on the glass, but the mirror didn't break. The image didn't flicker. Nothing. It was as if I had become the reflection trying to escape. Then the light began to fade. Everything went dark, except the mirror, the only source of light. And there, I saw scenes playing, like a film. He living my life, working, laughing with my co-workers, kissing someone I'd never met, living better than I ever had. And me, trapped in that reversed hallway, where time no longer moves, where no one ages, because you're no longer alive. Slowly, the mirror dimmed, and all that remained was darkness. But sometimes, in certain moments, when someone walks through the wrong door or swears the reflection in the mirror moved before they did, that's me, trying to come back. You've heard 3 stories, 3 lives that slipped through the cracks in reality. But what if déjà vu isn't just a feeling? What if it's a warning that we've been here before and didn't survive last time? So next time you feel like you've lived a moment before, don't ignore it, because you might be about to repeat the end. If you enjoyed this story, click the link below and uncover even deeper horrors in our exclusive ebook.